Welcome to the Ignorance is Strength podcast. I'm your host, Fabian motherfucking Ojeda, and I don't know shit, but that's okay. All right, let's get this shit started. Thank you everybody for listening to the Ignorance is Strength podcast. Hope you all enjoyed episode number 84 with Neil Getzlow. Definitely appreciate his vulnerability in telling his story. Different kind of addiction for sure. And I'm glad he told it. Hopefully, was able to help at least one person. Different kind of episode. We're usually all about the ha-ha, but, sometimes we just like to tell some cool stories about cool people. And with that being said, we have a brand new guest today. Certainly a cool person because I don't know too many people who have written, trilogies of books. But I want to welcome to the podcast for the first time, Miss Christen Stovall. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm ramped up, ready to hear about these novels here.
Awesome. Love to hear that. I love talking about them, so it works.
Yeah. So, this is, to me, it's really cool because I like writing. I'm not like professional or anything like that, but sometimes I get lost in it, and a lot of people always think like, oh man, I'm pretty decent at writing. Like I think I can write a book, but we never put actual pen to paper or typing it these days, I guess, right? Yeah. And we never actually follow through with it and do it, right? And so for you've gone through that process already a number of times. I wanted to just how do you do it? Like, how do you get started? How do you get that motivation?
Well, I've always enjoyed fantasy, and I was reading Tolkien at like an absurdly early age. And even when I was little, like my teachers would be, oh, she's really good. She behaves herself, but she just daydreams all the time. And I was always creating stories. And then when I was 28, I was widowed. And, we'd only been married a year and a half. So I kind of picked the writing back up. I had gotten distracted with life. You get married, you get the job. There's just not time for those things. Mm-hmm. And I suddenly found my entire life plan just out the window. And I had this vision for a scene. It was sort of someone saying goodbye to their loved one. And then that turned into a whole story. And then that turned into a trilogy. And now there's going to be a prequel. So, I guess when I jump in like into the deep end.
Mm-hmm. And so you're essentially creating a new world. There's got to be like tons of characters, and you have to keep the continuity and everything, especially since it's across the series. Like a lot of people like to criticize like the Star Wars movies and be like, well, that's not keeping continuity because they changed X, Y, and Z, and they have so many people just ripping it apart.
Right.
And so is that difficult? Making sure that you're consistent and keeping, continuity in this little world that you've created?
It can be. There's a lot of note taking and a lot of just like picking up my copies of the book and flipping around and going, what did I name that town? How did I spell that name? Wait, did I kill that character? I don't keep it all in my head. I'm not going to pretend that it can just stay there. A lot can, but I really do go back and check and make sure. And there have been a few times when I was writing the rough draft and then I went back through and I went, well, that is not what I said in that book. So I'm going to have to make some adjustments now.
Mm-hmm. Now the books that I'm referencing right now is a Song of Souls trilogy, right?
Yes.
Yes. Which one is first? Which was the first book of the three?
Soulbound is the first book, and it's mostly to introduce the characters and the world and kind of get set up for the plot and where it's all going to go. It certainly has its own plot and a beginning, middle, and end. I tried to give that one a more finished feeling at the end because, in all honesty, I was a little afraid that I'd lose my steam at the end of that book. So Soulbound is the first, and then Soulfire is the bridge, and then Boundless is the last book.
Mm-hmm. So, without giving us too much, because we want people to read these books, right? But give us a little, back of the book synopsis there. Like, what is each one about essentially?
Well, Soulbound starts with the main character, Aislin's husband, dying. I took direct things from my experience in the grieving process. But in this world, sometimes when two people, when one person dies, their souls connect, and the other one, the living one, ends up with the ability to heal.
Mm.
And she can still speak with and see her soulmate after some training. So she ends up going to the city called the City of the Blessed, and this is where the magic users in this world live and govern themselves, to be trained as one of the Soulbound.
Mm-hmm.
And with that, then she begins her training, and we do a slight time jump to about 3 years in the future, and there are some things going on that she doesn't know about, and she gets sort of drawn into them and ends up on a bit of an adventure she didn't expect, as these things usually end up happening. She meets some people along the way. Lysander, her friend, who is a wizard in training, and she's met him through learning to be soulbound, and then a young and untried prince, Kieran, and he's on his own little mission. And they end up exploring this world and going after an artifact that Kieran's uncle wants.
Wow. So it sounds really interesting. A lot of different elements in there. Wizards and everything. So it is very, very heavily based in fantasy. So you can pretty much do whatever you want in there, right? And like the sky's the limit kind of thing, right?
Yeah, I draw from history as well. I think if you get too far outside of people's realm of experience, the world is too foreign and it's harder for them to connect. I mean, you do have to have those little bits of reality in there, but it gives you so much to play with, and you can create your own religions, your own magical systems, your own geographies. It's a lot of fun. That's one of the things I enjoy in writing and reading, is just being taken somewhere else to this hopefully immersive world and exploring that. And I always like when the characters have a journey and they start out one way, and by the end of it they have been changed by their experiences, because that's life. We're all changed by our experiences.
For sure. With this series, do you have a bit of a following? Who are your readers? Is this for youth? Is it for for children, or more for adults?
I tried to make it fairly broad. I would say the first book in particular is, I in my opinion, it's geared towards adults, as you are dealing with some deeper concepts, grief and loss, because that's sprinkled throughout. But I did try to keep it reasonably PG-13, just so there could be a broader audience. I would say probably the youngest would be 12 or 13. There are a few naughty words and some implied things in later books, but it certainly does get more mature throughout the trilogy, partially by merit of the fact that the characters get more mature.
I see. Okay. So like maybe compare it to not so much like a Harry Potter type of audience, but more so maybe like a Twilight series, kind of like that.
Maybe like The Hobbit. I mean, I'm not Tolkien. Like, God, I would aspire to be Tolkien, but I'm not Tolkien. But it's certain. I would say that I wrote more for adults, but young adults could enjoy it as well. I think most of my readers are adults, and the prequel is definitely a book for adults.
Okay, what did you hammer in more there? Is it just the tone's a lot more adult, the words are a lot more
the adult? The tone is definitely more adult. It takes place about 200 years before the trilogy, and while it's still in the same world, there's a lot less focus on the fantasy elements. There's some focus on political intrigue. There's a higher body count. And some more adult things that while tasteful, I would not say are for children.
Okay. Yeah. Fair enough there, you know.
It's also difficult because different parents are okay, different parents and different kids are okay with different levels. You know, you'd have some parents who would let their kids watch really gory horror movies and others who are like, no, you're sticking to Disney cartoons. So it's just, it really is like a kid to kid, parent to parent thing.
Right. And so I imagine then that you can't, you know, try to aim for that audience. You're just writing what you want to write, and where it hits, it will hit, right? I mean, it's
Exactly.
not because you're not doing, you know, ABCs and, you know,
Right.
what do you call it? The Aladdin genie and stuff like that, you know?
Right. Yeah,
Right.
I
So this,
definitely wanted the deeper tones in there. There's some darker stuff. There are some swear words and there are some implied uh, love scenes.
mhm.
Just by merit of what gets her into the adventure itself and what Aislinn is dealing with, there are going to be those elements in
Mhm.
it.
All right. I wanted to see, you know, like the process of like putting a book out there and, you know, getting it released and finding that you have an audience. Like what's that like?
It's a lot of work. um, I chose to publish independently. I didn't even actually send it out to anyone because of the therapeutic nature of writing it
Mhm.
for me. I didn't want anyone else to tell me, you know, it has to be this way, and I didn't want permission to go after it.
Right.
I did hire an editor, and then I let her rip it to itty bitty pieces, and I slowly scotch taped my ego back together and went through it. It was a very good growing experience. I think she helped me to learn what to focus on and what I needed to get better at. And so I didn't just self edit and then send it to a friend. I did hire someone to go through it and just really make it work.
Mhm.
Then once it was out, it was, you know, of course, first you're breaking in to your audience, like your friends and your family, and hopefully they tell people, but then you network and you go to different events and talk to other authors, and that's a really awesome thing. Most of the authors I met have just been so supportive of one another, and they help each other and, you know, really lift each other up, which is great. So I always tell people, like, that's your strongest tool right there, is become friends with other authors, support them, and hopefully they usually support you back. Um, and it's a lot of it networking, and then of course advertising. So there's a lot of things that you would just assume are part of it. They're part of any business, and then
Mhm.
there's just endless hours and a lot of coffee.
Right. Um, you know, have you gotten anybody that has reached out to you and said, "Hey, I read your book and, you know, I really enjoyed it and I'm a fan," and anything like that?
I have. It happens every once in a while that someone will just message me and start talking about the books. And then I have people who friend me and then they never say anything. So I never know, well, did they do it because of the book and they're afraid to talk to me? And they really shouldn't be. I'm a huge nerd and
Oh,
I'm mostly friendly. But I have had it a few times. At one point after the first book came out, a young widow messaged me. I don't even remember what social media platform it was, but she had just recently lost her husband, and she was even younger than I was, and
mm,
she just reached out to me and needed someone to talk to, and that to me was the most powerful and like humbling thing, because on some level it helped somebody going through something that I understood,
mhm.
and that was a really amazing moment. I mean, sad. I was sad for her, but it was a very, yeah, like I said, humbling experience.
Yeah, well, it must be. Especially since you're putting your, you know, your heart and soul into these words, you know.
Yeah.
Um, you know, to me, you know, I do the podcast. I think, you know, for myself, if I'm being honest, from mostly like a hobby type of thing, right? And it's crazy to see sometimes because I get to look at the demographics of who's listening and where. And I always enjoy that because you get to see how far your reach is, you know. And I
Yeah.
get to see people from, you know, Asia, Africa, all over the place. I think every continent except, you know, Antarctica, and I'm trying to get Wi-Fi for those penguins down there.
I'm sure
but
they'd love the show.
I bet they would. I'd interview them too. They're amazing creatures.
Who wouldn't
Um,
interview a penguin? Come on.
but the demographics to me always trip me out, and so that's why I ask, do you have anybody reach out to you? Because I never thought like, hey, like I said, I thought this is like a hobby for me, not like it's anything that I'm gonna make a career out of. I have my 9 to 5, but
Yeah.
and but that's the part that keeps me interested. It's like, man, how far can we get this reach? And that's why I asked if you've had people reach out to you, because that's got to be really cool. Because they're taking something that you're doing, and you have a passion for, and they're telling you, hey, I'm really enjoying this. Even if they add you and don't say anything, because I've got people that I don't even know. Somebody's listening in Switzerland every week. I'm like, who the hell are you?
Wow.
I'm like, do you even understand what I'm saying?
I mean, presumably they are.
Yeah.
You understand.
I mean, I'm just hoping it's not a bot of some sort, but even if it is, hey, thanks for the listen.
Right. Even if they are, you have a Swiss bot.
Yeah, there you go. That's cool. Might want to write a book about some Swiss bots after that. No, but I bring up too. I said for me it's a hobby. Because a lot of the times when you try to do something different, that's not your typical 9 to 5 sit at a desk type of job, people will tell you like, it's a hobby, it's a pipe dream, it's this and that, and that comes with being a writer, that comes with being like an actor or like a gamer. But even then, that's becoming more prevalent these days.
Oh yeah.
Anything like that, people want to bring it down to their reality and say it's not possible. I know you self-publish and you're doing things to make it happen for yourself, but do you ever get that where people are just like, maybe focus on something else?
I haven't gotten that. I have gotten like, they haven't just straight up said it, but there are times I've like picked up on the attitude. And it did take a little while, and it's finally getting past this, but it took a little while for like family members. I have family members with small children to get that just because I was at home didn't mean I was available for babysitting. I mean, in fairness, that's partially on me because my nephews are adorable and small, and I was like, yes, I will play with the cute babies. But it got to where I was like, okay, guys, I really can't do both. And then as they've started to gain momentum, I haven't had the ability to do those things as much. But for a while I was working and doing this, and it's just sort of getting to the point where I can't do both. I was also doing a lot of theater in the area, and I haven't been able to do that either. It's getting to the point now where I'm like, well, do I want this or do I want this? Because I don't have time for both.
So you're not currently doing like another like a full-time job. You're strictly writing right now.
I'm strictly doing this right now. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's commitment there, right?
Yeah.
I mean, is it kind of like, is it a difficult thing to do, or I mean, do you find it, that and I don't mean to get like super personal with it, but
no,
do you find that it pays the bills?
It helps. It does help. I mean, I am on disability as well because I can't see very well, but that is not much,
Right.
But it between the two, I'm good. So, and then when my father passed away, I did move my mother into my house as well because she was out in the country in a house that was falling apart. And I'm like, no, this is not going to happen. You're going to come here. So, and when I bought this house, when my husband and I bought this house, it was to fill with a family, and that didn't happen. So now I've had various family members live here throughout the years. So I have filled it with family.
Yeah, one way or another, right?
Yeah.
Now, being a full-time writer, you say you have your hand in a lot of projects right now, right? So you're writing the prequel to your trilogy. What else are you working on right now?
I am in the process of co-writing a series that is unrelated. We're calling it the Fae Touched Chronicles. The first one has not come out yet. It's with a friend of mine who's also an author. She has some books published under the name Jennifer Sanders. And what we're doing this one a little bit differently in that we're actually writing the first draft of all of the books before we start going through editing and publishing the finished product. So we're at the moment. And what's interesting is we had two of the stories written years ago that we just wrote it for fun. And the other, like maybe a few months ago, we're like, wait, why are we not using these? You know? So we had two written, and then we decided one of them, rather than being the second, should be the third. And we're about to finish the one that became the second, which is a little confusing, but stick with me here.
All right.
So we have the first draft of the first three books almost completely done. So, in fact, last night we worked on the finale of the third book that we're working on this series. It's confusing because we've rearranged them.
Hey, but if it makes sense to you and you can put something out, why not, right?
Exactly. And it's fun. The way we do it it's a lot of fun. It's almost more play than writing.
What is that series more? Is it still kind of like in the same like fantasy, young adult / adult, or something completely? You mentioned it's different.
Mm-hmm. It's more. It has more of a romance bend to it, but there are stories that go in there as well. It actually takes place in Victorian. These three books in Victorian Scotland, but some of them will move outside of Scotland. And it deals, we have characters that all kind of get introduced, and then like each one will kind of deal with different characters that are connected to one another. So it's been a lot of fun. It's Victorian era, but with some fantasy elements in there. So it's been fun. It's been a lot of fun to explore that and do some world building and get to know new characters and take a break from the heavy fantasy where I have to create every element of the world. This one I can be like, no, I can just Google when they did this. I can Google this timeline. But it takes place shortly after like the Jack the Ripper murders would have happened. So it's sort of the time period. One of them will have a mention of the Loch Ness monster. So just little tidbits and fantasy elements in there.
Nice. See, like with certain, like series and stuff out there, like it's just so many characters I can't get into it. Like the whole Marvel universe and stuff like that. I don't know. I know it's like, I know it's movies and it's not quite the same, but I mean it's still kind of like like it's like a fantasy type of thing, right?
Yeah, I mean it certainly has those elements to it. I would say like modern comic book superheroes, like if you look at it in many ways, they take some of the same forms and formula as like epic fantasy does. You've got your heroes and your villains and like good versus evil. So I think there's definitely some similarities.
Yeah. And so like there's just so many characters in that universe where I'm like, I'm never gonna follow this, and I like to, I like to be entertained. I love the Star Wars and movies and everything like that. I was a big fan of the Harry Potter movies. Now my question is, there's so many different types of like fantasy books out there, right? Is it competitive or is there space for everybody on the shelf? What does it take to really kind of stand above, or do you want to stand above, or do you want to stand parallel? It's like it's I guess it's all a mentality, but is there enough space on the shelf for everybody, or I mean, do you try to stand above the rest?
I mean, I think everybody hopes that their books will stand out to people. But the way I see it, it's not like trying to pick where you're going to eat for dinner. Like if you pick one book, it doesn't mean you can't read the other book. It's
right.
Now, if you pick one place for dinner, that's it. You're going to be full and you're done. But if you read one book, you can still go read the other book as well. Of course, I hope that they stand out. Like I think all authors hope that they stand out, and there's a part of me that's like, I would like these to be movies. I would like to see this happen, and I mentally cast people. I always mentally cast, so I've got the visual as I'm writing, and but I try not to think of it in a competitive way. Like I'm not I'm somebody who's very goal driven and I have ambition and I want to hit these goals, but I'm not particularly competitive. Like I don't like games where somebody loses because then I feel
Mm.
bad that they lost. Even if I'm
Uh,
the one that won, I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. So I wouldn't be good in like competitive sports because I just feel bad, you know.
mhm.
But yeah, I mean, I want them to stand out. I don't want anybody else to get smushed if they stand out, but
Right. Yeah. It's a good attitude to have. I think, the reason I asked is just because there's a lot of, forms of entertainment where the market is so saturated, right? You look at video games and it's just so many of the same games over and over and over again. And some of them just never get touched because, it's like there's a slightly better version out there, you know?
right, right.
Same thing with music. There's so many musicians out there and, they're all trying to sound the same and do the same thing that some of them just get left in the dust and nobody hears of them ever.
Right.
But I've never been in the realm of an author and I don't know if it's the same kind of feel and I'm getting that it's not because you like the way you described it. Yeah, there is enough room on the shelf for everybody and
Yeah.
and you're right, you could kind of be like a glutton for books and it's okay.
Yeah.
Like um I think yeah, maybe once people get in that whole, that routine of reading, they just crave next one, next one, next one, next one.
They
You know,
do. Yeah.
and I think I don't think for like something like video games or movies, it's the same. You know, that's just
Yeah.
me though. But you
Well,
did
I mean,
mention
I game too, so I'm sitting here going, it isn't the same. I have my favorite games and I play those games, and even if something's like that game, I'm like, no, that's just off-brand game. I'm
right,
not that
yeah,
interested in it.
uh-huh. And that's really what it's like. It's so competitive.
Yeah.
Um, but I guess yeah, the I guess it's a different world for books. And I hate to admit it because I work, especially I work in education, but I've never been a reader. I've never
Yeah.
been one to like. I'm never going to say like, hey, I'm just going to go home and read a book. Like I've never done
Right.
that. Right? Do you
Yeah.
find? I mean, do you find that? Do you think like a lot of people still read these days, or I mean, is it just something that's kind of like fallen off? Because um, I know like a lot of people don't even watch like regular TV anymore. They might like binge watch like Squid Games or something like that, but people aren't even entertained by TV anymore. It's kind of crazy, and so I'm wondering if there's still a lot of people that are avid readers out there. I assume you being an author, you run into a lot of them, but do you think in general, people are still reading?
I think there are a lot of readers. I think there are a lot of people who would be readers if they had more time. I hear that a lot. Like, I just don't have time to read. I usually do audiobooks. So that's what I hear a lot, which was really frustrating. And I'm now in the process of getting the first book put into audio format. But, I think there is that element of people get really, really busy. And then there's some people who just, they aren't readers. And it's not that they don't enjoy a story or they're unintelligent. They just, the sitting there and reading, it doesn't work for them, or maybe they can't visualize it the way that they would like to.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there's still a lot of readers. I think if readership had really started dipping, I don't think that we would still have the best-selling authors that we have. I don't think that we would still have books being converted into movies. There's still an audience, and there,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, there's still a market for them. I think it's just people don't necessarily talk about the fact that they're reading. I mean, I think a lot of readers are also introverts and they're like, no, I'm going to sit at home with my book and not talk to people.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Um, you mentioned, and I was going to ask you about that too, but you jumped in and talked about it already. That you would love to turn, your books into like a movie, right?
oh,
Um,
yeah.
is that something like you would seriously like sit down and put together? And do you have any like actual hope of and aspirations to get that done, or is that kind of still like far out there and it'll maybe happen?
Well, I'm not qualified to make them into movies, but like if Peter Jackson ever wants to knock on my door, I'd be like, yes, yes, yeah. But I mean, it's something that would be awesome and amazing. I don't have the slightest inkling how one makes that happen. and
Yeah,
and right now I'm focused on the writing part of it. So
right.
maybe
Well,
someday, fingers crossed.
yeah. Well, we with the people in this circle that have gotten us connected through the podcast. Hopefully, you'll find
Yeah.
somebody that'll be willing to.
Yeah.
Um, because I wanted to draw that parallel between the books that are turned into movies, and sometimes they just flop, and then other times they're great.
Yeah.
I me being the non-reader, I'm always like, nah, the movie's great, I don't need to read the book. But some people, there's always people that say like, no, the book was much better. What would have been maybe some movies where you've read the book, you love the book, and when you see the movie you're like, didn't hit, not at all.
Um, I hate this, but the Hobbit movies didn't hit
Really?
at all.
Okay.
Yeah. And the problem was that they tried to turn the Hobbit story into the Lord of the Rings, and it was not. It was the Hobbit story was written for a younger audience, and it was much more simple, and it was not Lord of the Rings. But I also have a thing, and I'm really very opposite of many people in that I am not one that wants to read the book first
Mm-hmm.
because then it might ruin the movie and I might
Mm-hmm.
otherwise enjoy the movie. Whereas if I watch the movie first and then I read the book, it's like I get the director's cut of the movie. Like, oh my gosh, look at this extra explanation that the movie didn't say, but now it makes so much more sense. But it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't bother me that it wasn't in there because I didn't know it was left out. So now I can go back and watch the movie and go, oh, I understand this even better. you know?
Mm.
So I
Yeah.
do tend to go toward the movie or TV series or whatever first, just so that I have a better chance of enjoying them both.
Mm-hmm.
And then and there is one rare occasion where the movie came out and then I read the book and I liked the movie better.
What was
So in
that?
that Stardust, I liked the movie
Oh,
so
okay.
much better than I liked the book.
So the few books that I did read was because they forced me to, like, in elementary or middle school, right? And
Yeah,
so I actually really thought, the first Harry Potter movie, they did a great job, putting it all together and capturing the magic. It
right.
might not have been 100%, what was written in the book. Some things might have been changed slightly, but I thought they did a great job with the movie and setting up the sequels and everything like that. The
Mhm.
other one that I remember reading as a kid and really enjoying was James and the Giant Peach.
Oh, I
And
loved that book when I was a kid.
and I thought they did a great job with the movie. It was claymation or whatever, but um I loved it. It was everything that I kind of imagined,
Right.
Some even down to the nasty ants.
I did see the movie once years ago, and I can't remember whether I liked it or disliked it. It must have been a very tepid thing because I don't remember a strong reaction one way or the other. But it had
Mhm.
also been years and years and years since I'd read the book. So I think for a lot of it, I was going, was this in the book? Wasn't it in the book? I don't know. That was just a lot of me trying to remember what I'd read.
I'll tell you one though that really ruined it for me. That I enjoyed the book in sixth grade, and I thought, man, they need to make a movie out of this because it's just such a great story. You can visualize a lot of what's going on, and I was like, when they make the movies, is going to be just going to change the world, right? And then they completely shit the bed on it.
Oh
Um,
no.
The Giver.
Oh yeah, I still to this day haven't read the book. I only saw the movie.
Uh,
And I remember that was another one where I don't remember having a strong reaction one way or the other. And maybe it would have been different if I'd read the book.
I was a
Maybe.
I was offended.
Oh yeah.
I was
I
like,
seem to remember hearing a lot of people didn't like the movie. So
no, it was terrible, and only because it just didn't, it seemed like they tried to make it too, like, futuristic, and I understand, yes, some elements of that in there, but it's to me seemed more like they were trying to adapt it into like a version of 1984. Like,
So it's like they didn't capture the spirit of the book.
not at all, no. And it was nothing like I imagined, you know. And I wonder what the thought process was when they were putting it together. But not a fan. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
See, and I think that's the thing. I mean, there are a lot of really good adaptations that don't follow the books perfectly, but they got the spirit of the books. And I think that's really a lot of times where it lies. Like the Lord of the Rings trilogy, the movies didn't follow the books perfectly. And certainly there were people who complained about some of the changes, but it caught, like, it had the feel of the books. It had that large, the stakes are so high, good versus evil feeling to it. So I thought they were amazing. And that was kind of what got me started in actually sitting down and writing stories back in the day. It was Lord of the Rings fan fiction. That's where I kind of started playing around with it. Like I'd had little original stories when I was younger, but what really got me into like actually sitting down and writing as an adult was playing in Tolkien's sandbox. Very, very sneakily. Like I'm like, all right, just I'm not as good as you, but I really like elves.
I got to start somewhere, right? I mean,
Yeah.
um, speaking, you know, starting somewhere. I do want you, you know, you're in there. You're writing the books. You've written the books. You put them out there, right? And
Yeah.
so, to somebody who's listening, who might be like an aspiring writer, you know, they don't know whether or not to get started or how to get started, and what the process is like. Maybe some of the ups and downs, right? What's some good advice you can throw their way? Um, and in order, I mean, I guess first and foremost, like to know whether or not they really want this, and then
Yeah.
how to get it started.
Um, that's going to come back to the thing that actually got me to sit down and start working on this trilogy. And it was funny because as you were talking about this at the beginning, you said some things that touched base on it. I went to a Comic-Con. It was like the first year one happened even semi-locally.
Mm.
And I met one of the guests was a writer, Neo, and he had his books out there, and I was like, oh, you're doing what I want to do, and like I want to write books and go to Comic Cons, and you're doing what I want to do, and he just looked up at me and he goes, so do it,
Yeah.
and my brain went, oh, right. So that's the first thing I would say is do it. Just
Mm.
if you have a story you want to tell, write it down. Tell the story. It just if you love it, do it. And if you love your characters, write them. Give them their story. I wouldn't put too much pressure on it. I mean, that's one of the things I say. Don't put too much pressure on it. Your first draft is mostly going to be crap.
Mm.
I mean, it's just mostly going to be crap with a
Mm.
few little jewels in there. And you're going to have moments where you're like, I am the greatest writer that ever existed. And then you're going to have other moments where you go, I am the worst writer that ever existed. I should
Yeah.
stop doing this. But just write, just tell the story. And if you're already in the process of writing a book and you're struggling with writer's block, what I do myself, and this doesn't work for everyone, but for me personally, I just push through.
Mm.
Even if it's not great, even if it's, coming out in 5 sentences at a time, I just push through. And
Mhm.
then I go, you know what? This is just getting the skeleton out. This is just the bare minimum. I'm gonna go back through and change it. This is just getting past this part that I don't want to write so I can write that fun part that I've been looking forward to,
Mm.
which for me is usually tormenting my characters.
Well, playing a little bit of God there, huh?
Yeah, I have learned that I deal with difficult situations by torturing characters. It's fine.
All
Which is why
right.
I got like a huge, rather mean book written in 2020 in like 3 months. It's like this whole year sucks. Characters, come here.
Well, hopefully, we're burning them at the stake or something.
Oh, I didn't do that. I mean, I did threaten to do some other really mean things and actually did some mean things, but it wasn't that.
All right. Well, I mean, you know what? other than what we've already talked about, I mean, any other big projects in the near future, or any big goals that you want to hit?
Mostly just to keep writing books, get The Twisted Path out on December 10th, and be done with those last difficult stages. That's a big thing. Just be completely done and ready for that on time. Mm-hmm. Usually it's like the week up to it, I'm working from the moment I wake up to the moment I go to bed, like every day. So the big goal with that is to be ready ahead of time. So, right. But mostly just that prequel and the Fae Touched Chronicles, which hopefully will start coming out next year, but we don't have a date set for those yet. Mm-hmm. It's a little more tricky when you have two people's schedules to work with.
Oh yeah. That's as with everything, right?
Yeah.
Things hardly ever sync up there. Well, dang. I mean, I thought, from what sitcoms and TV taught me, writers were supposed to be neurotic and crazy and, kind of jerks. Well, you've proven that stigma wrong.
Thank you. I mean, I'm a little neurotic, but I'm crazy in the fun way. So. Well,
it works out, but definitely had a lot of fun with this conversation. Learned a little bit about being an author, and that's what my podcast is about. Let's talk to people who you otherwise wouldn't talk to, and see what it's all about. I mean, we talked to a food blogger the other day. We talked to, someone with addiction the other day. So it's I'd love to share different stories and perspectives. But anything else you want to throw out there on the podcast? Any social media or website?
Yeah, I mean, if they just look up Christen Stovall books, they'll find my website. I'm on Facebook, and look me up, Christen Stovall. Also, the page where all of my author stuff comes up is Boundless Fantasy. So if they search that page should come up, and that's where all of the news about my books and then lots of sort of fun memes. I try to keep it light, try to keep it interesting, not just news blips about the books, because I love my books, but I would get bored with that too. I am on Twitter grudgingly, so I'm not there much, but I have it, and I'm on Instagram as well. Again, all of it is Christen Stovall. You should be able to find me.
Can I just say Twitter sucks?
You can say that, and I will agree with you.
I mean, I've still not figured out who actually uses it, because
I don't know how people get audiences, and I'm like, there's nothing of relevance here. Like, I don't know how you people expect me to do stuff in like 45 characters.
All people do is retweet like celebrities, companies, and different, big entities. The actual people who use it don't have any friends on there. They just tweet their whole day like, I am getting a sandwich. That sandwich was good. Like, oh man, I wish I hadn't eaten that sandwich. Like, I don't give a shit like what you're doing minute to minute. Like give me something that I can laugh about. Give me a funny meme. Give me a video. Share a video that's funny. But if
I do like the funny memes. That makes me.
But you can see those on Instagram. I'm just like,
that's Instagram and Facebook. That's where the funny memes are.
I'm anti-Twitter, but I'm on there too, unfortunately.
It's kind of part of the job. You have to, and you're like, I don't know. I haven't tweeted in 3 months. Let me tweet a thing. Tweet.
I don't think I've ever tweeted. I've just put out like, catch a new episode, and it automatically loads on there.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm anti-Twitter to the most, but you know what? If we can find you on there, we can find me on there. I guess it's a good enough tool.
There we go. I don't know. Maybe one day we'll have large enough audiences that then people will just follow and retweet us. So there we go. Maybe we'll have a use for it at that point.
I'm looking forward to being retweeted.
Well, challenge accepted. Now I have to go find you just so I can retweet you and be like, ha!
That'll be the first. All right. Well, again, I appreciate having you on. Thank you so much.
It's been fun.
Definitely, I hope people check out, your series, your upcoming books, and everything else. For everybody listening at home, I appreciate it. Thank you. Fuck you and good night. Strength Podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. Like, follow, and share on Facebook and Instagram at Ignorance is Strength Podcast and on Twitter at The Ignorance Pod.